Hello and welcome to a City Voices interview with Mike Veny. Mike is an author of Transforming Stigma, and he's also a public speaker as well as a peer in mental health. Hi, Mike. How you doing?
Hi, Dan, and hello to your viewers and listeners out there.
All right, let's get right into it. Now, a lot of this is based on your book, which I have read. So some of these questions are hard, and I might not be emoting properly with the particular question, but let's go for it, okay? So, mom, you describe your mom periodically in the book, here and there. She was, you describe her as being like very warm and loving, and then at the opposite spectrum, kind of cold and neglectful. Can you explain that more?
Oh, it's a great question. When we talk about mental health and mental illness, which are two different, topics, even though we sometimes lump them together, one of the questions that people always ask is like, well, how does someone get to a point where they have mental illness? And there is no one way, right? Like it's multiple things for each of us. And it doesn't mean you can even identify those. But one of those that comes up for a lot of people is parenting and their journey as a child. And my mother was a good mother, but like all people, she was imperfect. And in one sense, she was very loving and motherly. And in another sense, well, she just didn't have the social skills, I think, to be able to give me certain social and emotional skills that I needed. So I didn't really know how to soothe difficult emotions that would come up for me. No one ever taught me how to soothe that or talked me through it. So I would just explode. And also, like, her being imperfect, yes, she was loving, but sometimes manipulative too. And we all know how toxic relationships of any type can wreak havoc on our mental health, especially when you're a child. And it lives with you for your whole life and contributes to who you are. So that's the story with my mom.
What did your dad impart upon you?
Whew, that's a really good question, Dan. We're still working on that. He taught me, first of all, his relationship with my mother taught me a lot, seeing that dynamic. But, hard work is something that comes to mind and sticking with things. To have the kind of career that I do where I'm consistently out there speaking and making money doing that. I mean, it takes hard work. And I remember him telling me oftentimes I play like Little League Baseball and I wanted to quit. And he was just be like, no, you got to stick with it. And, frustrating. But oh my gosh, I'm so glad for that now because I've learned to stick with things when they're difficult through him. So that's something he really imparted on me that I'm really grateful for.
What did your mother impart upon you?
You know what? My mom, one thing I'll never forget about her, she was very fit. She loved like going to the gym. And she'd sit there, Dan, like flexing her muscles at dinner. And like my brother and I'd be like, why are you doing this? And she'd kind of make us feel bad about our, how in shape we are. So, I'm not as good as I could be, but I go to the gym. I take care of my health, my physical health. That's something that she imparted on me. And also, I guess her charm, she did have some charm about her. And I think I got some of that from her sometimes.
As a youth, you were prone to like explosive behaviors. How do you deal with explosive emotions as an adult?
Dan, you ask really good questions. I love this. Here's the deal. I talk about this in the book, but there was a show in the 70s that got really popular called The Incredible Hulk, starring Lou Ferrigno. And one of the reasons I believe the show was popular is because everyone can identify with that, trying to hold it together, right? Dr. Bruce Banner, and then exploding. And almost like, when you explode, you become the emotion, and if you struggle, like I do with emotional dysregulation, I always try to explain to people what that is. It's like if you pinch me, I'll go, ouch. But some people, if you pinch, it'll feel like their body's burning intensely because that's how they respond to certain things. So with me, with my emotions, it's like that, I get angry and it just takes over. What I've learned is that I really can't manage those emotions. Like they're just out of control, but I've learned to work with them. And so for now, like when I experience intense emotions, um, I sit with them and just feel them. And it took a while to get there. It took practice. The other thing, I've learned to reach out to other peers and my therapist when I'm in a difficult place, because sometimes when we get very emotional, we become irrational. Like, I know me, when I'm irrational, like, I make some stupid decisions, say some things I don't even remember. So at that point, when I know I'm spiraling there, I got to call somebody. I got to call somebody I know who is just there to just talk with me, just talk with me, and that actually makes it more manageable. So that's kind of how I deal with it now.
Tell us about the stigma cycle.
I was trying to figure this out because we're told sometimes as young people, don't talk about mental health, or don't talk about your mental health. And I know I came from a home where it was like, we don't want people to know about my struggles. And I think it's with good intention. People think bad things are going to happen to you if, you have mental health challenges or mental illness. And I realized for me that stigma was a three-part process. Like, people would say stigma is a mark of shame. That's the definition. But the way we actually experience stigma is a lot differently. It starts with shame, like you feel ashamed. But because of the shame, you don't talk about it. And what's interesting is the shame can be about yourself or about someone you love. So maybe you've got a family member who's struggling with mental health. You don't want to talk about it. It leads to silence. And that silence leads to these other negative things: sabotage, social injustice, self-destructive behavior, and its worse, suicide. And it just keeps going. And I kept observing this happening in society, with other people and with myself. And I was like, this just has to break. This is just a never-ending downward spiral. We got to stop this feeling of shame. We've got to start talking about it, remove the silence, and we have to figure out how to do something about self-destructive behavior, suicide. And it's not a perfect, solution, but it's something that I thought could really be addressed. And I've been very happy that people have embraced it and found it helpful.
So, in regards in honoring breaking the silence, I ask that we role play now. How to discuss our mental health challenges with a stranger that you meet somewhere. I know you've done this before, not the role play, you've done it for real. I'll play the stranger. We are sitting at a bus stop, and I guess we're a little bored.
By the way, for those of you listening in New York City, this is such a New York thing, right? This totally could happen. So, okay, let's go.
When's this bus gonna get here?
I don't know, but I'm feeling anxious. I need the bus to come.
You're anxious? What's going on with you?
Well, I mean, I struggle with anxiety. It's very debilitating, and I've battled it my whole life. And it just comes up sometimes, and now it's coming up because I just want the bus to come. I just need it to come. I'm panicking. I'm gonna be okay, but I'm panicking.
What do you usually do when you panic?
You know, I don't know. In the past, it's led to bad things, but nowadays, I'm doing better. It's more of like I just sit with it and go through it, and maybe I might. I'm talking to you. I don't usually do that, so you're actually comforting me. So thank you, stranger. But yeah, I try to sit with it now and talk to my therapist. That's what I've learned that helps me.
Okay. My name is Dan, by the way. So what's your name?
My name is Mike, and thank you for talking about this with me. I have been trying to get better at sharing about my mental health because I know a lot of people struggle out there.
Um, you sound like a public speaker.
No. I try to play pretend public speaker, Dan. But yeah, I think.
Oh,
Oh, sorry. Oh, we're still in the role play? Okay.
no, we're not. We're not. But you talked about anxiety, which is something like a lot of people can understand. What about talking about something that is more out there, more like scary? Uh, yeah. You want to try
So
that?
Yeah, you know, and can I just say that the reason I did it, I love this role playing idea. Like, oh my gosh, like you and I could go to town on this one, like improv night, right? But the thing is, one of the things that I was also doing there is like giving something lighter to start the conversation. So one thing I've learned about having conversations, and I'm glad we're talking about this, sometimes people they feel like okay, they want to share and they disclose everything, like too much information. And the thing is, there's no right balance to strike. And it's important, though, in any conversation that you have to start at a certain level with someone that you don't know and eventually allow it to get to that deeper level. So, but let's go for it. Let's go to that deeper level.
Okay. Well, I hope you feel less anxious talking to me.
Yeah, I mean, look, I had a panic attack years ago and had to go into the mental hospital again. And I'll be honest, I'm worried about that. Like,
Oh man, the mental hospital. That's where they send the crazy people.
well,
Are you
you
telling
know,
me that you had it so bad that you lost your freaking mind?
well, that word crazy, I know a lot of people use, but sometimes, when we use that, we don't realize that it does harm to people. And we sometimes use it innocently and don't think about it, but it does harm sometimes. And the reality is any of us could have a mental health breakdown. It doesn't matter who you are. You could feel normal, but still be struggling, And that's one of the things that we're learning. But no, I went to the mental hospital because that's the treatment options that are available for someone with the kind of condition that I have, because I get to the point where I can't function. And, for many of us, we're just wired that way. There's no reason for it. We're not bad people. And what's really interesting, Dan, is when I've gone into the mental hospital, some of the patients that I met are like CEOs from major companies and stuff like that. So it doesn't matter who you are.
I had there was this kid growing up who lost his mind, and his name was Jizz. And he would always he would stroke his head, his shaved head, and he would say, "Oh, that's that ill bass line. That's that ill bass line," because he would listen to music, right? And he camped out in the park in the Bronx, and there was a park called Van Cortlandt Park, and he would just live in the park, rain or shine. He had like a covering or a tent like material, and he set it up between two trees. He did everything there, and he didn't hurt anybody, but he had so much explosive energy, and the things he was saying you couldn't always understand. Were you like that, or did you meet anybody like that?
That's a great question. Sometimes when someone is really struggling with a mental illness, it can manifest in different ways. It doesn't look like one thing. So I could be sitting here calm, just talking to you about the weather, Dan, and be hearing voices in my head and completely disassociating from reality. But sometimes people do act in ways that are kind of scary to us or confusing. They don't seem like they're normal. And oftentimes when it comes to mental illness, they aren't harmful. It's just unique. Everyone's unique. And realizing that everyone's, again, wired differently. Sadly, sometimes mental illness does lead to things like homelessness and people who want to be homeless and just stay homeless, even if you offer them help. But the key is, we're trying as a society to get better at addressing those challenges. We're not perfect. We're far from it, actually, but we're trying. I know for me, I've been at points where I would disassociate. That means lose touch with reality. So, for example, years ago when I was having that panic attack, and maybe I was at this bus stop, yeah, I would have been panicking about the bus, but I might have just wanted to go away from you because I thought you might want to hurt me. So I know sometimes when I dissociate, I think people want to hurt me that don't want to hurt me, and I try to get away from them. I even had a situation where with dogs years ago, I'll never forget it. I see a dog on the street, normal thing in New York, right? Somebody with a dog, and I would, oh no, we're walking to the other side of the street. That dog's coming for me. So I realized at that point something was really wrong, and I needed to get some help for it. And I still do that from time to time, but we've gotten it to a point with my medication where it's more manageable. If that makes sense. And by the way, you're such a good listener, Dan. I've never had this from a stranger at a bus stop in New York City.
Well, Mike, I gotta say it's really enlightening meeting you here. and I wish we could continue this conversation. Hey, I'll give you my email address and maybe we can exchange some emails. Well, here comes the bus.
Okay, nice to meet you. Thanks.
Um,
That was awesome.
Here's the next question. Who has been practicing with your Transforming Stigma workbooks?
So, I wrote that workbook because someone was asking for some kind of tool. So basically, it was a woman I dedicated the workbook to. She said to me, she came up to me in Georgia. I was coming to a conference and she gave me a hug. She said, Mike, I love this book. And she held up Transforming Stigma. And she said, but I got a problem. I want to actually use some of this material in a discussion. I don't know where to begin. So I said, that's a good idea. I need to do something about that. So that night, I actually went to the hotel room and called the editor, Michael, that I worked with on the book. Said, hey, we got to talk. We got to do a workbook here, and I got some ways of going about it. So what I've heard that some people use it for their own individual journaling. Sometimes people use it in discussions. And the way I wrote it was that you don't have to do everything in the book. You can actually just ask a question that's written in there in a conversation and get the discussion going and close the book. So that was the idea behind it, is that it could be used however it needs to be used, if that makes sense. Sometimes I even open it up and pop it open.
Okay, but where has it has it been circulating? What groups have been using it?
Oh, got it. Mental health organizations, different ones throughout the country. A lot of youth organizations, especially in schools, have been using it. And certain, clubhouses and stuff like that in the Midwest a lot, actually. Don't ask me why, just the Midwest. So that's where I found it being used. It's so weird, Dan. Can I just tell you, sometimes I'll go to a mental health organization and they'll show me 20 copies of my book and and the workbook, and I'm like, oh my God, what are you doing with this? So oftentimes they tell me. Sometimes actually, one place I know, an organization in New York actually uses it in their support groups a lot too. So.
Okay, and it's the subtitle of your book correct me if I'm wrong, it's How to Become a Mental Wellness Superhero. Is that it?
Yes.
Okay. So what's your favorite comic book character and why? And don't tell me the Hulk.
Oh, why do you gotta ask a hard question? What's really interesting? My brain just went to my favorite wrestler. But okay, we can go to that later. My favorite comic book character, I think the one that I resonate the most with is Batman. And I'll tell you why. Batman had some serious trauma, and since the 90s, when they started doing this whole Dark Knight thing with Batman, I think they've portrayed this character as someone who's got some stuff going on, and is battling with some stuff, childhood stuff, his own internal stuff. In the latest movie, Batman, it was really about his anger issues. He was calling himself Vengeance in the movie. I am Vengeance. And there's something that I just really, really get about that. In one sense, he's doing good in the world, but in another sense, he's really struggling privately and got some stuff going on. So that's the one I resonate with the most, I think.
What are some superpowers of a mental wellness superhero?
The biggest superpower is actually being able to manage their own mental health journey, manage their own mental health journey. And that's different for all of us. Self-care for me might be different than self-care for you. For some people, self-care is just making sure they don't get into the mental hospital and take their medication on time. That's it right there. For others, it's yoga and meditation, all that. And the key is finding that cocktail that works for you. The other thing that a mental health superhero in my mind does is shares the message of mental wellness with others and talks about it. Just has the conversation like I did one time at a bus stop with a stranger in New York City, and that's so important to do, is just to normalize it, just have the conversation and realize sometimes it's going to be uncomfortable. So those are some things that mental health superheroes do, in my opinion.
Okay, that's what they do, but what are the superpowers that they have that they can use in the world?
Oh, the superpower would be conversation, you know, um, a voice, right? The other superpower is resilience. The resilience that they develop can be an example to others. And I think that's so important. One of the things I love about the whole peer movement is that you've got people who are like me, some struggle even worse than I ever did, and they are examples for other people. They are examples for others. They are working, living examples. I mean, that's the ultimate superhero right there, if you think about it. That's like magical powers. And if you think about mental health 50 years ago, this didn't exist. This didn't exist for people. It was just like you're alone by yourself in an institution, and that's it. So those are some of the superpowers.
Here's a good question. You're a public speaker, so after a speech and it receives a standing ovation, because I know you've gotten those, what next? Are there steps you take afterward to build on something with the people that you have affected?
Great question. Well, actually, I want to say this about speaking. First of all, speaking is very triggering for my mental health sometimes because I have to share my story. In fact, before we had this meeting today, I gave a presentation and it was virtual, but I made it a point to book a certain amount of time in between my appointment with you and the presentation to center myself and calm down, I needed to just take a breather, take a little walk, because there's a lot going on. I was talking about my mental health journey. So number one, what I do in presentations is I have rituals for taking care of me after, so I'm okay. When it comes to groups, the sky's the limit. Sometimes groups will have me come in and do workshops with them. Sometimes they want me to do drumming workshops with them. Sometimes they want me to talk more about stigma and how can we apply it together. Sometimes I'm training teachers. I actually got to do that this week, which was really nice, training teachers. And the latest thing is courses. I have courses online that people have been taking and a lot of them have been liking. So the thing is with different groups, I try to stay in touch with them and find ways to help them. You reached out to me and I got you some books because I said to myself, I love your energy, Dan. Like I love how you're going about things, and I really love how you're showing up with this stuff. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to, do the interview. We had a great phone conversation that one night, and I said to myself, let me get this man these books, so you can do whatever you need to do with them. I don't know what that's going to be.
Let's explore this question though. So you would continue to do groups, but like mobilizing other superheroes like you, like the forming the Justice League or the X-Men or the Avengers to because there's more power and influence when a number of superheroes come together. Have you cultivated other superheroes? Are you forming a Justice League? What's happening?
I love your questions. I can't say that I formed a Justice League. Here's the thing. I think I've maybe contributed to some superheroes coming together. I know that one of the things that I've heard a few times is like, we were inspired by your presentation and book, and so we had a meeting about it, discussed some things that we could start applying in our organization. That's always nice to hear. So in that sense, we can call that a mini Justice League. But there's nothing that I've really done formally other than trainings, because I think a lot of this stuff is about people figuring out what that looks like for themselves. So for example, let's just say I got to meet with you and some people that we could go over some of the content in the book and have some great conversation about how we can use it and come up with some plans even. But ultimately, the real superhero moment is supporting you and doing that yourself, however that needs to look for you, because it's different for every group.
What character traits make for an effective public speaker?
Oh my, what character traits? Yeah. I think with being a public speaker, what I've learned is obviously the ability to communicate the English language. That seems easier said than done. But one of the lessons I've had to learn through public speaking is that even though, like all of us, I was trained how to speak the language, presenting in front of people requires a different set of skills to articulate an idea, to articulate a concept, to help solve a problem and give people a call to action. So it's really important to develop that communication skill as a character trait, and it's something I'm still constantly working on. Like for example, when this podcast goes live, I'm gonna listen to it and say, what did I say to Dan that day? And I'm gonna hear our a little reenactment of a stranger conversation, be like, this might be the greatest thing ever. So the thing is, that's one trait, but the other trait is learning about the people that you're speaking to. So for example, you are part of the peer movement, and thank you again for the work that you do. Let's say I was doing a presentation to all of you. It wouldn't be like the presentation to corporate America. I'd have to think about who I'm talking to, what their challenges are, and focus it around you. So that's one of the things you have to do, is focus on others the way they need the information.
Can you give me an extra 5 minutes for this conversation?
Yeah.
All right, all right. Because now there's two more questions. How can someone break into the public speaking game?
One of the ways you can break into it is actually an organization that's all over the world called Toastmasters, which you can go in and practice public speaking. And they have a great program, and it's fairly inexpensive to join. And you can just show up at meetings wherever. The thing that I like about it, it does two things. It will help you with public speaking, but also for people with mental illness or mental health challenges, it gives you an opportunity to practice how you're coming off and communicating. So I have found that working in Toastmasters, yes, it's helped me as a public speaker, but it's helped me articulate to my therapist what's going on a little bit better. So the thing is, I think it does two things there. It's like public speaking, but also just communication in general.
Last question. What are your haters saying, and how have you dealt with them?
You, Dan. Wow. I was going to do a video about this. So, what are your haters saying? Sometimes I do get some haters, and sometimes they're disguised as friends. I don't know if you've heard that term, frenemy, but they are out there. Sometimes they criticize what I say. They say, "Well, I don't like what you're saying or how you're saying it," and that's okay. The way I'm saying things is not going to resonate with everyone. That's why it's so good that we have different voices out there speaking in different ways. So, for example, I might resonate with you, but someone else might be like, "I cannot stand this guy," and that's okay. So some of them, say things like that. Some of them are asking, "How do you get to do so much speaking?" And you're so busy doing this. Like, what do you do to get all that speaking? And they say things about me, but it's okay. It's okay. I like it. I know it's gonna sound really strange. I like it when haters start running their mouths about me, because it means they're advertising me. It's like free advertising. And it's okay. It's okay to have haters. And I think one of the lessons I've had to learn with my mental health, especially as someone who's dealt with paranoia for a lot of his life, is that just because there's a hater doesn't mean I have to take that on or make it a part of my thinking or whatever. And I've learned through therapy, for the most part, to separate that.
Has anyone ever said, Mike, you're a phony, and Mike, you're just doing this for the fucking money?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it hasn't happened much. I've heard it maybe less than a handful of times. I think I should be hearing it more, actually, but I have heard that, and I'm okay with hearing that. They're entitled to their opinion, and I don't feel the need to defend myself, because I'm comfortable with what I'm doing and who I am and how I'm going about it. I know that my journey is real, and my struggles are real, and someone else doesn't have to see that. It's okay if they don't. And the weird thing is, so Dan, sometimes when they've come up to me like with this, right, I just respond like, okay, sorry you feel that way. And they don't know what to do. They want me to like fight back and say, no, I'm real. So the thing is, I don't feel the need to fight with people about it.
Do you know who Thich Nhat Hanh was?
Buddhist?
Thich Nhat Hanh, yes, he was a Buddhist monk. He died recently.
Yes.
Martin Luther King nominated him for the Nobel Peace Prize because he came out against the war in his native country, Vietnam, and convinced Martin Luther King to speak out against the war many years ago. But since then, he formed Buddhist colonies all over the world and promoting mindfulness practice and a lot of your concepts are his concepts and other people's concepts, you know, spiritual concepts. But the reason I'm bringing him up, oh, come on, let's go.
We're
Good.
talking about haters.
Oh yes, haters, right. He blew his gasket. This peaceful guy, you know, he felt like a rage, and when he was speaking to Americans in the U.S. somewhere about the Vietnam War, and then there was someone in the audience came out and just said something that triggered him in the middle, and he instead of responding, he said, "Excuse me." And he walked away. He got some fresh air, and then one of his supporters came out and he's like, "Tick, Ty." They call him Tay. Tay. That means teacher. Are you okay, Tay? Are you okay? And then he had to explain that he was feeling a very powerful anger, and that he didn't want to speak in anger because that's when people make mistakes. So now
Hmm.
you are someone who is not a stranger to explosive emotions. Haters never triggered you. You never did you
They
even
used to.
like feel the
Oh,
rage?
let me tell you. Oh, Dan, I love that we're talking about this because when I was early in my career, they used to trigger me like you wouldn't believe. And I would spiral into anger, anxiety, sometimes for days. I couldn't focus. I would obsess because I've got obsessive compulsive disorder and it takes over. It takes over. So this is not something that I've always been a master at, and some days I'm sure I fail at it, but for the most part nowadays, because I understand that we all have different points of view and see the world differently, and I know that I'm not everyone's cup of tea. Thank God I'm not everyone's cup of tea, right? Like everyone has people they resonate with and who they don't resonate with. So that's why I've gotten to the space where if someone is a hater who wants to say Mike Veny is a phony or this or that, well, they have that right to do that, and they have that right to feel that way. And I don't know, maybe in their mind they're totally correct, and I might even say to them, maybe you're absolutely right. I don't know, but in my mind, I'm authentically me.